The day my son-in-law stood up in front of my staff and told them I was dead weight the company had outgrown. I was sitting 3 rows back, holding a cup of Tim Hortons coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. I didn't say a word, I just watched him, and I thought, he has no idea whose room he's standing in. Let me back up. I spent 31 years building a mid-sized logistics and warehousing company outside of Kitchener, Ontario. We started in a rented bay off Highway 8 with 2 cube vans, a second-hand forklift, and 6 people I'd known most of my adult life. By the time I was 54, we had 4 facilities, 62 full-time employees, and contracts with 3 of the largest grocery distribution networks in Ontario and Quebec. I never put that on a business card. I never needed to. I am not a flashy person. My truck is 8 years old. I wear the same style of flannel shirt and rotating colors all winter. I don't golf. I don't go to industry dinners. I have a camp up near Tobermory that I bought 20 years ago, and I spend as much time there as I can manage. My employees know me by my first name. Most of them have been with me long enough that their kids have come and gone from summer jobs with us. That's the context. That's the man my daughter brought home her new husband to meet. My daughter met him at a conference in Vancouver about 4 years ago. He worked in operations consulting, the kind of work where you fly into a company for 6 weeks, make a lot of slides, recommend layoffs, and fly home again. He was sharp. I'll give him that. He had the vocabulary and the confidence and the kind of handshake that people associate with competence. Whether or not competence is actually present, I didn't dislike him immediately. That's important to say. I gave him the benefit of the doubt for a long time. My daughter loves him, and I love my daughter, and that alone was reason enough to try. The first Christmas after the wedding, we were sitting around the table at my sister's place in Guelph. He got onto the subject of automation and logistics and held the floor for about 20 minutes. Good information, mostly. A few things I'd have pushed back on if we were in a different setting, but I didn't. I ate my turkey and I listened. He looked at me at one point and said, not unkindly, "Sorry, this is probably a lot of jargon. What do you do again exactly?" My daughter opened her mouth. I got there first. "I'm in warehousing," I said. "Oh," he said, and he nodded, and something shifted just slightly behind his eyes. Not rude, just concluded. He had filed me somewhere and moved on. I didn't correct him. My daughter shot me a look across the table. I shook my head a little, let it go. That was the first time. Over the next 2 years, there were more. Not cruel moments, not exactly. More like a pattern of small dismissals that accumulated the way ice does on a roof. Slowly, silently, until the weight of it becomes its own problem. He would talk about business trends and look at me like I was a pensioner being patiently included in an adult conversation. When I mentioned a supplier issue we'd been navigating, he suggested I find someone with some change management experience to help. When my daughter mentioned, offhand, that I'd been in the news the previous year for a local business award, he said, "Oh, that's great." The way you'd say it about a child winning a spelling bee. I let all of it go. Not because I'm a pushover. Because there was no version of that fight that ended well. He's my daughter's husband. That's not a small thing. And in my experience, people like that, people who need to be the smartest person in any room they walk into, they have a way of teaching themselves the hard lessons eventually. I just didn't expect to be in the room when it happened. About 14 months ago, my daughter and I had a conversation that I think about still. We were driving back from visiting her grandmother in Cambridge and she was quiet for a long stretch. Then she said, "Dad, I know he can come across a certain way." I kept my eyes on the 401. "He's been talking about the business," she said. "He thinks there might be opportunities to streamline things. He's mentioned maybe coming on in some kind of advisory capacity." I thought about that for a moment. "What do you think?" I asked her. "I think it could be good," she said carefully. "He's very good at what he does. And you've always said you want the company to evolve." "I have said that," I agreed. We didn't talk about it much more that day, but I started paying attention. He came up to the Kitchener facility in February, officially as a family visit the way he framed it. I gave him the tour. He was engaged, professional, asked smart questions. He also asked a few questions that were less smart and framed them as though he already knew the answers. I noticed which employees he talked to and which ones he looked past. He thanked me for the tour in the parking lot and said, "I think there's a lot of good bones here, but you could probably tighten up the middle management layer considerably." He said it the way someone says something they've been sitting on for a while. He said, "Thanks for the thoughts." He said, "I mean it as a compliment. You've built something real." You just might need someone to help you take it to the next level. I nodded. What I did not say was, the middle management layer he wanted to eliminate were people who had been with me for an average of 11 years. People who had bought houses and had children and built their lives around the fact that this company was stable and that I ran it in a particular way. What I did not say was that I had turned down 2 acquisition offers in the last decade because I didn't want to hand my employees to someone who would treat them as line items. I thanked him again and drove back to the office. 2 months later, he called me with a proposal. He wanted to come on as an operational consultant, unpaid initially, to put together a restructuring plan. He had a contact at a private equity firm in Toronto that was looking at mid-market logistics companies. He thought there was a real opportunity to unlock value. I told him I'd think about it. I called my lawyer that night. His name isn't relevant, but he's been my lawyer for 22 years, and he is the least excitable person I've ever met, which is exactly what you want in a lawyer. I walked him through the conversation. He listened. Then he said, "What does your operating agreement say about outside advisors?" I pulled it up while we were on the phone. No outside advisor, consultant, or contractor could be granted access to company financials, personnel files, or operational systems without the written consent of the principal shareholder. That was me. Any restructuring plan affecting more than 10% of the workforce required board approval. The board was 3 people: me, my longtime operations manager who'd been with me since year 4, and a retired accountant from Waterloo who'd been a silent partner since year 9. We didn't meet often, but we were all still very much there. My lawyer said, "So what's your concern?" That he'll come in, put together a plan, and then use my daughter to pressure me to implement it. There was a pause. "That's a reasonable concern," he said. "I don't want to fight with my daughter about her husband's business ideas," I said. "But I also can't let him walk in here and start dismantling what we built." My lawyer said, "Then don't let him in the door in the first place. Decline the offer, politely." I did. I told him I wasn't ready to bring in outside advisors at this point, but that I appreciated the thought. He said he understood. He was gracious about it. For about 6 weeks. Then the phone calls started. Not to me, to my operations manager, Gwen. She'd been with me since the beginning, knew the business as well as I did, and was not someone you caught off guard. She told me about the calls herself. He'd been asking her questions about the organizational structure, about personnel, about which contracts were due for renewal. She'd been politely non-committal, the way she is when she doesn't like where something is going. "What do you want me to do?" she asked me. "Keep taking his calls," I said, "and keep telling me what he asks." She nodded. She understood. The situation came to a head at the annual all-staff meeting in March. We've held this meeting every year for 27 years. All 4 facilities, everyone who can make it, at the big hall we rent out in Cambridge. I give a state of the company address. We do a recognition lunch for long service employees. It is not a glamorous event. People wear their regular work clothes. We serve Tim Hortons and deli sandwiches, and there is always too much coleslaw. I had invited my daughter and son-in-law as family, the way I'd invited her before. I thought he would sit with her, eat a sandwich, shake some hands. I did not expect him to ask to speak. He came to me about 20 minutes before the meeting started. He said he'd put together some thoughts on operational efficiency that he thought would be valuable to share with the team. He had a presentation on his laptop. He said, "I think the staff would benefit from hearing an outside perspective." I looked at him for a moment. I should have said no. I have replayed that decision more times than I can count. But my daughter was watching from across the room, and I thought of all the dinners, and all the Christmas tables, and all the small moments I'd already let pass. And I thought, let him say his piece. You can handle the aftermath. I told him he could have 10 minutes. He took 40. He stood at the front of that room in front of 62 of my employees, and he gave a presentation about the future of mid-market logistics in Canada. He talked about the pressures facing the industry. He talked about automation, about overhead, about bloated organizational structures. He had data, he had slides, he had the confident, unhurried energy of a man who has never been told to sit down. And then he got to the part I hadn't known was coming. He said there was an opportunity, in a company like this one, to improve profitability significantly through strategic workforce reduction. He put up a slide that showed an org chart with red boxes around roughly a third of the positions. He said the company was carrying roles that existed because of loyalty rather than necessity. He said, not quite looking at me, That sentiment was a poor substitute for strategy. He said a good leader knew when to make hard choices. The room went very quiet. I was sitting in the third row. I had not moved. I had not changed my expression. I watched Gwen at the far side of the room, look at the org chart on the screen, and then look at me. I watched Terry from the Cambridge facility, who has been with us for 17 years, look at the red box around his position, and then put his coffee cup down on the table. My son-in-law was still talking. He was wrapping up now, pivoting to opportunity, to growth, to what this company could become with the right structural changes and the right leadership guiding it into the next phase. He said, and I want to be precise here because these were his exact words. He said that what this company needed was someone with actual operational credentials and formal training in organizational design. Someone, he said, who understood modern business rather than relying on relationships and habit. He looked out at the room and said, "No disrespect to the way things have been done here, but the world has changed." Nobody said anything. Then my daughter from the back of the room said, "Dad, do you want to come up?" I stood up. I walked to the front. I thanked my son-in-law for his presentation. He stepped aside and gave me a nod like he was handing off the floor. I looked out at my people. I said, "Before I respond to any of this, I want to ask one question." I looked at my son-in-law. I said, "Under our operating agreement, who holds final decision-making authority over any restructuring that affects more than 10% of our workforce?" He blinked. "I mean, the ownership, presumably. And who is the principal shareholder of this company?" There was a pause. He said slowly, "You are." I said, "I am. I've been the principal shareholder since I founded this company 31 years ago. The operating agreement requires unanimous board approval for any structural change of the kind you've just described. The board has not met. No proposal has been filed. No vote has been taken." I let that sit for a moment. I said, "The 47 positions you've marked for elimination belong to people in this room, people who helped build what you just presented slides about. They're not going anywhere." I looked back out at the room. I said, "We had a good year. We've got strong contracts through 2027 and 2 new ones pending in Quebec. There is no crisis here. There is no burning platform. What there is 62 people who do excellent work and a company that is fortunate to have them." Gwen started clapping. It took maybe 2 seconds before everyone else in the room joined her. I didn't look at my son-in-law. I didn't need to. The meeting ran another hour after that. Recognition lunch, long service awards, the whole thing. Terry got his 17-year pin and his gift card and his handshake and his standing ovation from the people at his table. I saw him look at the stage with an expression I recognized. The particular relief of someone who had been genuinely afraid and then found out, in front of witnesses, that they were safe. That mattered more to me than anything else that happened that day. My son-in-law left before the lunch. My daughter stayed. She sat with Gwen and ate a sandwich, and I watched the two of them talking, and I didn't interrupt. When the event was winding down, she came and found me by the door. She said, "I didn't know he was going to do that." I said, "I know. I didn't know about the slides." "I know, sweetheart." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He's mortified." "That's between him and himself," I said. She looked at me. "Are you angry?" I thought about it honestly. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm tired, but not angry." She hugged me in the parking lot for a long time, the way she used to when she was small and something had frightened her. I held on. We've talked since, the three of us. It was not an easy conversation. He apologized, eventually, in the careful way people apologize when they're still not entirely sure what they did wrong. I accepted it, in the careful way you accept an apology that you know is only the beginning of a longer understanding. He hasn't raised the subject of the business again. I don't know if he will. My daughter is the optimist in the family, and she believes people are capable of more than they show on their worst days. And I think she's right about that, even when it's hard to see. What I know is this: the 62 people who were in that room that day are still there. Gwen is still running operations. Terry got a raise in his last review. The Quebec contracts came through. We're hiring 2 more in the spring. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I didn't humiliate anyone, though there was a moment, I will be honest, where I thought about what I could have said and chose not to. Some doors are better left closed. I just asked one question about a document that my son-in-law had never thought to read. The rest of it took care of itself.